Welcome, welcome to Jazzabrations Live. We're unsure as to what's happening right now, but
it's all right.
I'm your host, Linda Morgan, and I'm here with my co-host,
Teray Brandon.
And we are Jazzabrations and Beyond. Today here every first and third Sunday.
First and third Sundays, right.
First and third
Not
Sundays.
the second or the fourth, the first and the third.
The first and third. And today is a special day, and we are here to talk about a very special man whose birthday happened to be today.
Today is the 89th birthday of Minister Malcolm X, born Malcolm Little, May 19th, 1925 in Omaha, Nebraska. So he would have been 89 years old today, and he had some good friends that we'll also talk about. One was Sam Cooke, one was Muhammad Ali.
Absolutely. I was so looking forward to this show today and his birthday celebration today because as I share with you, and I also share with Brother Najee Ali because he was talking about doing some things around Malcolm X's day as well, and that Dr. George C. Frazier in 2012 ignited a small movement around Malcolm X's birthday, and he took on 5 cities: Chicago, New York, L.A., Atlanta, and Cleveland, and put on a 5-city cash mob. And what that cash mob did was to infuse $20 per person to go into these businesses and cash mob them in an hour's time frame. I did Southern Desserts when they first opened here in the Baldwin Hills Mall. And then we went over and did the Wings. What is that? Wings? No, not Wingstop. The big
Wings
thing.
and things. Oh, yeah. Where they get right there in the next to the mall.
Right there in Crenshaw, next to Albertsons.
Right.
So it was an economic infusion of money over a short period of time, and it was a $20 investment. And so I know, many years you did a wonderful festival right here in Leimert Park.
We
Tell
did.
us a little bit about that.
It was an honor to found the Los Angeles Malcolm X Arts, Culture, and Education Festival. And it was an event that magnificently celebrated his legacy, his life, his accomplishments. But we also looked toward the future, and we always featured artists, entertainers, educators that were continuing the legacy of not only Malcolm but others like Paul Robeson and Langston Hughes and Dr. King and others who had laid out some blueprint for us in terms of which way we should be going and what we should be doing. Malcolm being one of the cornerstones of that effort of black people in America to seek freedom, justice, and equality in various different ways. So it wasn't just a festival to me. I know people call it a festival, but it was really a continuation of the legacy of Malcolm X. And there's a lot of stuff that happened in my personal life as a result of aligning myself with the legacy that taught me a lot about this world, about life.
Absolutely. Now, that was in 2002.
2000,
so you was way ahead of your time.
It actually started in 1993, and it went for 15 years until 2007, at which point I wanted to save myself from exhaustion and make sure I focused on my family and kids that were kind of young at the time. And so I stopped doing it in 2007. We stopped doing it in 2007 because of me.
and there was a collaboration team that you had helping you at that time?
It was done under my organization's umbrella, Family. At the time, we were called Fighters for African Mental Liberation International, FAMLI. And that's still the spiritual foundation of our organization. Now it's the Foundation for Arts, Mentoring, Leadership, and Innovation. And under that organization's umbrella, we did the Malcolm X Festival, we did the African American Man-Child Conference, we did See a Man, Be a Man, Princess to Queen programs, and various other arts and cultural and educational projects. And so we had a team of people who would come together each year to produce the event.
Oh, absolutely. And I was telling my co-host, I said, I know it's a big undertaking, and maybe we should think about, being that we're both advocates here in the Leimert Park area, where we both are stakeholders. We live here, we breathe here, we do our weekly radio show here, that we can think about starting vision and bringing that back.
Yeah, I've always said to people that I would love for us to bring it back. I don't want it to be me, because it got to be, it wasn't a burden, but it took a lot of life hours
Right.
to do it. It wasn't just, okay, we're going to jump up and do this. It was year round. And for various reasons, I became, image-wise, linked with the Malcolm X legacy in a way that I hadn't realized. It was an honor to me, but it was also taken away from a lot of other things in my life that I had going on. And it never made any financial sense to do it, because people are still to this day either intimidated or afraid of Malcolm X and what he meant, or what they think he meant. Mm-hmm. And so that caused me some personal problems. I lost jobs, opportunities. I became stereotyped as some type of person that they had in their minds that they thought I might have been. And then there were people who were jealous and envious and et cetera. And so, again, it taught me a lot about maybe how his life was impacted.
Perceived.
Yeah, and how he was impacted in his own life. Because I know that whatever he dealt with was 10 times greater than what I was dealing with. And this was 40 years later.
Right.
Yeah, so.
Well, we'd like to invite our listening audience, and, we're Facebook Live. We don't know what's going on the other side of this voice on the cameras or whatever. But if you have an interest in joining us on this trek that we are thinking about taking on, put it out there. When you put it out in the universe returns, good or bad, what it is that you, that you seek. Mm-hmm. So we're seeking to use Malcolm X's birthday as an energizer to social economic liberation, where we create on that day, the day of May the 19th, whatever day it falls on, a economic cash mob where we create events to stimulate some selected businesses that we choose and that we help to really make his vision come alive.
Well, I'm encouraged to hear that. Malcolm talked about, in his day, he talked about black nationalism. Now, that's a phrase we don't use anymore. Now, we have a president who uses that phrase, not black nationalism, but he uses the phrase nationalism. And it means something totally different than what Malcolm was talking about. What Malcolm was talking about was the black community controlling its economics, controlling its politics, controlling its culture and its social interaction. And he sought to transcend religious boundaries, etc. And in his speeches, particularly the Ballot or the Bullet, he talked about, I think it was Ballot or the Bullet, or there was another one, the Message to the Grassroots, where he talked about us putting aside our differences and coming together around that which we have in common. And one thing that he said we have in common was the fact that all of us were black. And because we were black, we were treated a particular way in this country.
Right.
Like, for example, I was asked a question this morning about the distinction between civil rights and human rights. Malcolm X would not want people to call him a civil rights leader because he, following the lead of Paul Robeson and Du Bois, said that he was a citizen of the world and that if you're born into a country and they call you a citizen, that you shouldn't have to fight for civil rights. Like, why was there a civil rights bill? Why was it necessary?
Right.
Why was the Voting Rights Act in 1965 necessary? And this is 100 years after blacks were so-called free, 1865, after the Civil War. Well, we know that after the Civil War, there was a period called Reconstruction wherein black people were allowed to transcend their color and participate in society. They became landowners. Mm-hmm. They were educated. They were allowed to run for public office, and in record numbers entered into the Congress and to the senatorial races and won. And for 12 years, there was an epiphany happening in this country, unlike anything this country had ever dreamed of. Black people were voting, right? This was unheard of a few years before.
Right.
So there were people who didn't think that was the American way, who created something called the Black Codes and Jim Crow. And that lasted for another 100 years. So in essence, it can be argued that slavery didn't end until 1965.
Correct.
Not 1865.
Right.
So anyway, at the risk of over talking, all I'm saying is that when you have human rights, you're born with those rights. You don't have to fight and go march down the street and protest and all that to be treated as an equal human being, especially when the Constitution that you're born under or that you live under says that all men are created equal.
Right. And, it's so funny that when I watched the Muhammad Ali documentary last night, and he started marveling after this guy named George.
Foreman.
Pretty boy George. Pretty George.
Yeah, Gorgeous George.
Gorgeous George.
Gorgeous George, the wrestler.
And so he became, loud and boisterous like him. And he said, well, why are you being this way towards me? Mm-hmm. Pretty George has been this way the whole time, and he's never said nothing. But now, because I'm doing the same thing that he's doing, you want to make a difference out of it. Yeah. So I see, I mean, throughout history, we could definitely point to lots of situations where we've been totally left out of different circumstances, different pictures, but still we rise.
Well, you as a woman, and not only a woman, but a black woman, are in a business that traditionally has not afforded you, even among black men, equality. You've had to fight and scrape to get your voice heard out here. And then if you're ambitious, you're looked at as aggressive as a woman, like you're too aggressive, like you're too loud, or as a woman you shouldn't.
I'm doing too much.
Exactly, right? And all you're doing is expressing who you truly are. But because of your gender, even black men look at you and say, who does she think she is?
Right.
Like she's supposed to be in a certain space in society. That's the story of black people in America. And those of us who are, educated, and when I say education, I don't necessarily mean through traditional institutions, but just people who become enlightened. We're saying no, we're not going to be second class. So, if you say that Gorgeous George can say that he's pretty and he's the greatest, and I can say it too. Mm-hmm. And Cassius Clay, his name was Cassius Clay at the time, he said, hey, I'm not having it. I am the greatest. Y'all going to have to deal with it.
The greatest of all time. Yeah. I don't know, y'all won't be able to see our books that we have in front of us.
I got confidence he's going to get those cameras up.
Yeah, we're having little technical difficulties with the cameras, but I have a big old book in front of me called A Tribute to Muhammad Ali, the Greatest of All Time. Mm-hmm. I mean, this book is weigh about 10 pounds itself. So hopefully, before we end our show this evening, we'll be able to get those cameras on so that you'll be able to see the books that we have in front of us that's really talking about the life of Malcolm X. And Muhammad Ali was a good portion of their friendship. Mm-hmm. They talked about their friendship in this documentary. Right. How he says, I'm just here to talk to my brother. We're not going to tell you what we talked about. Right. Exactly. In the movie, he was like, just the fact that you ask him what we talking about is not going to be on the news. So that was the crux of my presentation that I gave this morning at the African Spiritual Center, Carras. And it was centered around 1964, February, after the fight where Ali, who was called Cassius Clay, whipped Charles Sonny Liston. Mm-hmm. Charles Sonny Liston was so devastating that there was very few people in this country who thought that Cassius Clay had any chance in hell to beat this man. Mm-hmm. This man had knocked out most of the people who had stepped in the ring with him. And most of them would urinate on themselves before they got into the ring out of fear of what he was going to do to them. Right. And so everybody thought that Clay would get crushed. And he made Liston quit. Liston did not come out for the 7th round of that fight. He was saying, Clay comes out to meet Liston, and Liston starts to retreat. If he goes back an inch farther, he'll end up in a ringside seat. Clay swings with his left. He swings with his right. Oh, look at young Cassius carry the fight. Liston is backing up, but there's not enough room. It's only a matter of time. Now Clay lowers the boom. Liston disappears from view, and the crowd is getting frantic. But our radar stations have picked him up. He is somewheres over the Atlantic. Who would have thought when they came to the fight that they'd witnessed the launching of a human satellite? Yes, the crowd did not dream when they put down that money that they'd see the total eclipse of the sunny. He said he did that poem, and I memorized it. And he whipped that man. And ask me what happened after the fight. Ask me. I can't wait to ask me. Ask me. What happened?
You really want to know?
Yeah.
After the fight, you want to know what happened?
What happened?
After the fight, they went to Overtown. This is a little part of Miami that was a colored city. Colored city. You know the colored cities like Oak in Oklahoma, Tulsa, Oklahoma. It was a colored city where only black people lived. They had their own hotels, their own restaurants, their own cleaners, and movie theaters and churches, everything, right? That's where Cassius Clay stayed, at a hotel in Overtown. And he invited a number of people, but 3 of the people he invited were the football star who played for the Cleveland Browns at that time, number 32, Jim Brown. Jim Brown. I knew you knew what I was talking about. He invited a great singer who sung songs like A Change Is Gonna Come and Wonderful World and Chain Gang. His name was Sam Cooke. Sam Cooke. And he invited another man who was a minister in an organization called the Nation of Islam, whose birthday is today. His name was Malcolm X. Can you imagine those 4 men in a hotel room, right, with the world paying attention minutes before because of the fight, and this young 22-year-old, Ali was only 22 years old. Sam Cooke was 32. Jim Brown was like 26, 20, whatever he was. Excuse me. And Malcolm was like 30, 37 years old, whatever he was. No, 38 or 39. He would turn 39. So everybody was under 40 years old. And they're sitting in this room and they're talking about the intersection of sports, politics, entertainment. Jim Brown and Muhammad are in sports. Sam Cooke is in entertainment. Malcolm is in culture and politics. Can you imagine them forging an alliance, unifying their forces, coming together and articulating a perspective for black people in this country, pooling their resources? That's George Frazier's dream right there, right? That's black economics. I mean, Sam Cooke had his own record label. He was certainly ready. This is one of the callers. I think he's calling into this number because I didn't give him that number. Is that Mr. Lorenzo on the line?
Yes, it is, brother. I'm here.
Oh, okay. He's actually here.
I'm in the back. Can't get in now.
Okay, the cameras is on now. We can see you.
We're going to get you in.
We're going to let you in.
All right.
The cameras is back on, honey.
That's our in-studio guest there.
Okay.
Yes.
I walked up front.
Oh, no, come around the back through the alley.
I'm coming back to the back right now.
Okay. We'll see you when you get in.
All right. It's great how we can do that and just keep going.
All righty. So it looks like our cameras is back on, y'all. We had a little podcast going on there. Podcast was just voice off. Voice only.
You got it. Let's give the brother a round of applause.
We got the best engineer in the house, Brother LeBron.
Yes, indeed.
Helping us out here. But we're just going on and talking about it's freezing up and everything on there. Don't even look over there. So just look at your camera so you can make sure you stay focused.
That's my camera right there.
Right. And so we were talking about Muhammad Ali and the 4 of them getting together in a group. So I was telling y'all about this book.
Oh, yeah. You want me to help you pick it up?
Oh, it's heavy. Look at it. Yeah. The camera's going out again.
Yeah, the camera's going out. Good. Come on. Low.
Wait. Low. So just come on in. I was showing this book, but our cameras may have gone out again on there, so you don't see it. But it's back and forth. But we're just gonna keep it rolling because we
got a guest that I invited. He's here now.
Absolutely. So come on in, my brother.
We'll
take
introduce
a seat.
him as time goes.
We're just talking and making sure that we are keeping the show rolling.
Right.
Even from podcast to video,
so
podcast to video.
Here.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
This is let me introduce this brother.
Yeah.
He's got a number of names, like some of the great people we talked about. More recently, Simon Ra, and there's a longer name to it. But he's I know him as Lorenzo. A lot of us know him as Lorenzo. He's a famous poet, writer, theatrical director, and actor. And he's also a person who, one of his plays that he does is The Meeting, a play about the fictional meeting between Malcolm X and Dr. Martin Luther King. And he does a fantastic Malcolm X himself, as you can see.
Absolutely. Well, we'd like to bring you to our church in February when we do.
And there's his little princess out there.
Well,
you might have to get her on camera, too.
Well, welcome to the show.
That's that Nzenga out there.
Thank you so much for having me on this momentous occasion, the birth of Malcolm X, El Hajj Malik. Shabazz.
Mm-hmm.
He would have been 94 today.
Was it 94? I think maybe I'm miscounting.
He was born
I said
in 1925.
25. Yeah. And this is 2019.
2019.
He would have been 94. I said 89.
He'd have been 94 today.
He'd have been 94.
So you just got a correction. He would have been 94.
Yeah, so I got to give him some more years then. You know, when I think about it, he would have been around the same age as Harry Belafonte, Nelson Mandela, and Sidney Poitier.
Yeah.
They're all in their 90s now.
Yes, I just lost a jazz legend, as a matter of fact, who was 94.
Mm-hmm.
Clarence C.J. Johnson, may he rest in heaven.
Okay, Clarence, we pray for your spirit.
Yes, he was a drummer. And
yeah.
he was 94, as a matter of fact. So,
so he's experienced enough that he can jump in. Mm-hmm. We don't have to go through a lot of stuff with him. And we were talking about that night that Malcolm, Sam Cooke, Clay, who became Ali, and Jim Brown was there also, going to this hotel in the black community of Overtown section of Miami and having a discussion. And Lord knows what they were talking about, right?
Right.
But we got a good idea of what they were talking about because they had been talking for years. It wasn't the first conversation.
Fly on the wall in that room.
Ooh.
Could you imagine?
Right. And on the documentary that they did on Muhammad Ali, and they asked Dr. King and Muhammad Ali that question, what did you guys talk about? And he said, I'm just talking to my friend.
He said, none of your business.
And that's none of your business, right?
That part.
We're not going to discuss what
did Dr. King say? He said, although we believe differently in terms of religion,
right,
we have the same position against the Vietnam War.
Right.
He's a Muslim, but I'm Christian, but both of us say this war is wrong.
Correct.
And this is Dr. King. This is the number one recognized Christian minister in this country. I mean, he
number one recognized in the Civil Rights Movement.
In the Civil Rights Movement.
They're going to recognize him before they recognize Malcolm because this is America.
That's true.
Right.
That's true.
So it was just interesting watching it. We didn't get to finish the whole thing, but I definitely want to go back and just soak it all up in terms of their relationships between those four men.
Well, these documentaries that come out, all the time, we see them, but there's people out here, our people, who for whatever reason they don't look at PBS or they don't look at Netflix in that way, and so I think that's one of the reasons we've got the Ivan on Rivers thing, because we need to screen these films. Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Like, people need to see that.
Yes, they do.
They need to see that.
I know a lot of boxing enthusiasts would love to see it because it has a lot more. It's packed more than just Muhammad Ali's life in the boxes, because it showed all of his relationships with the three gentlemen that we're talking about.
Right.
Exactly.
Jim Brown, Malcolm X, Sam Cooke.
Right.
And how they infused each other's in their friendships. Mm-hmm. And see, a lot of people don't know. They just, it was Muhammad Ali clashes Clay. But those four men together, just think about the
powerful relationships
of that.
Well,
all of them being the greatest in their industry, in their fields. Each and every one of them was the greatest.
Let me ask you a question, Brother Lorenzo. What inspired you to do that play, to produce the play? What was it that?
Well, I've always, like you, researcher, scholar in terms of history, and in terms of history that's not taught in school. I've always read about Malcolm. I mean, one of the greatest books I ever read was Alex Hayes' Malcolm X. Autobiography of Malcolm X. So to know his story and to come up on this script, which is called The Meeting, and it's based on, like my brother said, the fictional or non-fictional meeting that took place
They actually did meet. Yeah.
At Malcolm's Harlem apartment between himself and Dr. Martin Luther King, and the dialogue in this play is just incredible. The name of the playwright escapes me right now, and I should know that. No, the name of the guy that actually wrote the script escapes me, but the dialogue is phenomenal and it's relatable to today. But just to hear them go back and forth, they even have like an arm wrestling match in the play.
Right. They
like this.
And Dr. King wins, Malcolm wins, and then it's.
So is this showing someplace right now?
It's not showing any place right now. I actually directed it, and I played Malcolm. I dyed my hair red, had the goatee red, had the Malcolm glasses, and it was surreal. I mean,
He
we
wanted
went
me
in.
to play Malcolm, but I wasn't
Right.
ready.
Exactly. Because he always tells me, because I do a lot of plays. I do a lot of theatrical productions. He's always like, brother, why you don't never put me in none of your productions, man?
Yeah, then when
And I'm
they
like,
asked
and
me,
I'm like, well, I got one for you, brother. You know, I want you to play Malcolm.
I wasn't ready.
So is this production something that you want to put out there again, or?
Oh, we going to continue to do it as much as we can. I have a brother by the name of David Michael that plays Martin Luther King, and he does a phenomenal job as Martin Luther King. There's only 3 characters in the play. It's Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, and Rashad, who was Malcolm X's bodyguard.
I want another shot at that role.
Hey, I'll be happy to give it to you. I'd rather direct than actually be the director and the star of the play.
I want to earn it, though.
Yes,
But it's a lot of dialogue. You got to learn a lot of dialogue.
Well, that sounds like a plan to get it out there, get it produced and put out there, so that more of our young community.
Yeah. Matter of fact, I just spoke with Pastor
which church is
at the Fernando Pullum Performing Arts Center. Pastor Smart just spoke with her about using that space, the Fernando Pullum Performing Arts Center, which is right here in Leimert Park.
Absolutely.
About using that space to do some productions, and that would probably be the first thing that we do. She's going to email me and let me know what the cost is, but we'll do it right here in Leimert.
I'm gonna do my best, and I'll be.
You can do
right
it,
there.
partner. You
Absolutely
can. Do
can.
it. You can do it.
But can we, if y'all don't mind, go back to that trajectory that we were talking about in terms of the relationship between these brothers, if y'all don't mind.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
And so what I had an opportunity to talk about this morning was a brother named Paul Robeson. And a lot of people don't really know who he is. They've heard of him. They know he sang and he did, what's that song? River song, Old Man River.
Right.
Oh man, River.
Yeah, he's famous for that. He's famous for the role Othello.
Exactly.
He was the first man to star on Broadway, a black man to star on Broadway with a white cast. A lot of people don't know that when he did Othello. But he's also, to me, there's a figure in history called Imhotep. You're familiar with Imhotep.
Multi-genius
About
ancestor.
What did he do?
Imhotep was one of our ancestors in ancient Egypt, which was called Kemet, which means the Black Lands. He was a multi-genius. He was a physician. He was an architect. He's the builder of the Great Pyramid, the Step Pyramid. He was a poet. He was a priest. He was multi-talented, multi-genius. And his name, Imhotep, is when you hear a lot of people that they use the word now, when you woke, so-called woke, they greet each other. They say Hotep, which means peace. And that's paying homage to our great ancestor Imhotep, was a multi-genius.
So in my mind, thank you for that history on Imhotep. In my mind, Paul Robeson is a modern-day Imhotep.
Absolutely.
He was a linguist, speaking like 17
languages.
He was a concert vocalist. He was the first
Opera singer.
Yeah, and the first black superstar movie star in silent pictures, and then he transcended to talkies. He was a lawyer. He was the #1 orator when he was in college on the circuit there. He was the #1 college football player, the greatest in this country.
Yes.
There seemed to be nothing that he couldn't do. And later on, at the height of his fame, making all the money in the world, famous, he becomes a human rights advocate. He sees suffering among people all around the world, white, black, whatever, and speaks out against it. And then he began to speak about American imperialism. And they took his passport. They effectively cut off his money sources. And his career for 10 years came to almost a sliding halt.
Wow.
And the reason I'm mentioning him is because embodied in the spirits of those men we're talking about, Malcolm, Sam, Ali, they were all an amalgamation of Paul Robeson, if you look at it. There was an athlete, there was a scholar, a political activist, a singer.
All rolled in one.
All rolled into one.
Right.
So he was like all of them rolled into one.
Exactly.
And in fact, in researching Malcolm, when Malcolm was in prison, one of the people he studied so that he could learn how to give speeches and to give presentations was Paul Robeson. He studied that. If you listen to him closely and listen to Robeson, you'll hear inflections of Robeson's delivery in Malcolm.
Wow.
Yeah. So I wanted to mention him because, I don't think we talk about him enough.
Right. And we have gone the whole 45 minutes of Straight Talk, y'all. We're going to take a quick break, and we're going to be right back with you here on Jazzabrations and Beyond. I'm your host, Linda Morgan, with my co-host. And we are with our guests. We are Jazzabrations and Beyond.
All right.
Right back. Welcome back on this Sunday afternoon to Jazzabrations and Beyond. I'm your host, Linda Morgan, with my co-host, Tori Reese, and our guest is in the house.
I'm Lorenzo.
We're having some just excited conversation around this day. Today is May the 19th, 2019. It's a special day. It's Malcolm X's birthday. He would have been 94 years young, as we found out in our calculations. At the top of the hour, we said it was 89, but now we got it straight.
Yeah, because we got a mathematician here.
Mathematician came in and corrected us and let us know. I know you may be seeing in the background this poster, but this was a poster from the 2002 10th annual Malcolm X Festival that Tori was putting on right here in Leimert Park.
Yes.
So we've talked about energizing that and possibly bringing it back as well.
Well, there's been so much talk about it. There's not a week that goes by that somebody doesn't ask me, well, when you bringing it back? And I always tell them, if it's up to me, it won't ever happen because I don't want to do it by myself.
Right.
If there's a committed group of people who will all commit to working together, then I would be fine to be a part of it and help to bring it back. And I think the reason people want to bring it back, well, there's a number of reasons. One, of course, obvious, is that this city, for whatever reason, they don't
Our little
celebrate
in-studio
Malcolm X.
guest, y'all gonna have to chime it down over there. I understand.
Yeah, they don't. This city doesn't celebrate Malcolm X.
Right.
If you notice, I mean, you've heard basically nothing about Malcolm X
Today,
since we today, but since 2007. You know, well, when we were doing the event, you would always hear about Malcolm X, even if you weren't involved in the event, because we were always publicizing. But now, and I'd asked a question on Facebook. I don't know if you saw it.
I did.
I said, why does America celebrate Dr. King and not Malcolm X? And I included, including black people. Can't blame everything on white folks.
Right.
And did you see some of the responses? Or did you?
What's
What's your thought about that anyway? Like, why do we celebrate Martin?
Well, my thought is it's evident. You know, Malcolm was more militant. Malcolm was more in your face, and he told more truths and uncovered more lies about the status quo, about America, than Martin did. Martin was a little more passive, and in this what we call a revolution, civil rights movement, human rights movement, you got to have balance, you know. So they both had their purpose, but Malcolm was far more militant, far more America fearing than you know. I mean, when they looked at Malcolm, they saw like man. You know, when they look at Martin, they saw a whole different thing.
So let's talk about the 1960s. What happened in the 1960s? What comes to your mind when you think of the 60s? You know,
I was born 1961.
Okay, well, so it's not like you remember a whole lot, right? I got you. That was good.
History from y'all.
That was good. But I mean, you've heard of you've heard of Martin Luther King.
Yes.
You've heard of Malcolm X.
Yes.
You heard of the Black Panther Party.
Yes.
You heard of the Black Arts Movement. You heard of the Civil Rights Movement. You heard of John F.
And
Kennedy.
I was trying to come back, think in my mind, I was born in Watts. Mm-hmm. So in 1961.
Watts, 1965.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I vividly recall the riots.
Right.
You know, people actually running through the projects and it being on fire and all that. Mm-hmm. I just vividly see pictures of it, but I don't really have no tangible history to it other than...
But when you even think about it, right, like if you talk to somebody who was old enough to remember, why did all this stuff happen? Like, why did people riot in Watts, you know? Newark, New Jersey, Detroit, Michigan, Harlem, New York. All over this country, like, there were riots and people just rising up. People seemed to just be angry,
Now,
right?
what was that in relations to?
Well, if I had to, and I'll just be real quick. You had a situation where slavery was supposed to have ended in 1865, right? I think we talked about that earlier. But then you have another 100 years of what they call Jim Crow era. You know, where you were black and you couldn't go and sit in the front of the bus, and you know, we know about Rosa Parks. And but if we go back, we see that in the beginning there were people like, let's say, Ida B. Wells and this guy Homer Plessy, two famous legal cases that came to the Supreme Court, where in the end they said, well, you know, you can be separate but equal, and we know that's not true.
Right.
We know that when they're separate, there's inequality.
It's not equal. Right.
Right. So for 100 years, even though they were saying that everybody in America was free, it wasn't true. Now we have the prison industrial complex, where you have more people in America incarcerated than in all the other countries in the world combined. You have almost 3 million people in this country incarcerated. And the vast majority of them, even though black people are only 12% of the population, the vast majority of those incarcerated are people of color. So something's wrong. Something is wrong.
Change must come.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying. Change gotta come.
And in the 1960s, there were people who rose up who were saying that we're going to be the ones to make this change.
Enough.
That's why we're sitting here talking about Malcolm X. I mean, he died in 1965. Like, why are we still talking about somebody that died over 50 years ago?
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Because he was relevant. Mm-hmm. And we should not forget our past in order to progress in our future. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of us, for me, even in my 50s, late 50s now, this is not things that were taught in school, especially LAUSD, which is one of the biggest school districts, the second largest school district in the country. Our history has not been taught. Mm-hmm. And it just it's mind-boggling that, you know, we have to have soldiers that help us to remind us of our history, to help even bring out all the things about how we even are here, why we're here, how we're still surviving, how we're still rising. A funny thing, I want to bring this up. I'm a Tuskegee Airman, member of the Los Angeles chapter. And a gentleman came to our chapter this past week and was talking about how the Tuskegee Airmen, with all that they went through to become fighter pilots, and their history to still to this day, ROTC units out at Fullerton still don't know who they are. Come on, it's unreal that we have to be the ones who bring forth our history in order for the world to know about it.
So I have a question for Lorenzo. Given the fact of what Sister just said, and we know that the history is not taught, what are we to do? If the school system is not going to educate your child in her history, what are we to do?
It's our responsibility. We have to have forums like this. I mean, we have to do it in our spiritual centers. We have to do it at home first and foremost. And my daughter, she can be an example just from her name. And that's what we have to do as well. We have to name our children based on their history and their culture. My daughter's name is Nzinga, and she's named after Queen Nzinga of Angola, Africa, who was a warrior queen who for 40 years prevented the Portuguese from colonizing that region of Africa.
Wow.
And her name means beauty and courage. And if you ask her what her name means, she would tell you exactly what I just told you. Because
and that's something that you've taught her.
That's what I've taught her.
She can be proud and wear it with courage.
Exactly.
And an understanding of that.
So we have to do that. We have to do that.
So you didn't name her Shamika then? Huh?
Nah, not at all. I didn't name her Mercedes or Alizé.
Oh, okay.
Well, that's awesome.
She's sitting over there laughing.
But and with the advent of social media, it's a curse and it's a blessing, in my opinion. Because it's been able to bring up and dig up stories and history that have never been shared and now are being shared to the masses.
Exactly.
So, and then it also shows us how we are acting in ways that we want to act like we was back in the 20s or 30s or some way.
Right.
So it has a blessing and a curse, and maybe it's the instrument and the tools that we use in this modern day and age to take advantage of getting the information out to the mass.
Absolutely. I think social media plays a big part in the masses learning truth, and the masses learning our history and our culture, because it's not on mainstream media, it's not on mainstream television, but a lot of it is on the internet. A lot of it is on social media, and that's how a lot of people get this knowledge.
Yeah, it's what you do with the technology that's important. It's not the fact that technology exists, because there have always been opportunities for us to learn. I was talking about, I was making a joke about it, but about 3 weeks ago, some kids broke into my car, and I had some stuff in there that I thought was valuable. The stuff I think to be most valuable were the books I had in there. Well, they didn't touch the books, Now, they took everything but the books.
Right.
Now, had I had, $500-600 inside of those books, I'd have been just fine. Why didn't they take the books? Right. They took clothes and, whatever else. They thought I had a computer. They took my computer bag. There was no computer in there. I found my bag the next day. They figured that since there was no computer in there, then hell, they would just give the bag back or put it somewhere where I could find it. But my books were just fine. So it's what you do. What's your mental attitude about it? And what he just said is golden. I mean, it's his responsibility to teach his daughter. Right. Not the school system. Right. That's supposed to be extra.
Exactly.
And then we're going to have to deprogram them because they're going to teach them stuff that we don't want them to learn.
Oh, absolutely. Me and her teachers have it out.
Oh, we clash.
Because she'll go in and correct them on stuff, or they'll send her back with stuff, and I'll send them a note the next day. It's like, no, this is not what's going on. So yeah, we have conversations, and I think every parent should do that with their children's teachers.
Oh my God, don't want to go into my 18-year-old in his school and his teachers. He's getting ready to go off to CSUN. So I'm trying not to be the helicopter parent that go get me a job on CSUN.
Right.
Campus.
Well,
but, yeah.
I'll tell you what I used to do, because I got my bachelor's in the early 90s, and then I took off for about 20-something years of raising children. And then I went back to get my master's at USC. And of course, I'm older, and, wiser and all of that. And what I would do when I had to do my papers is I would find a way to use the books that I had studied, that was part of my legacy of my culture. And so I even asked the teacher once, I asked, okay, well, if you're studying sociology or social work, like, why aren't we talking about W.E.B. Du Bois
Right.
at all? And in my mind, not because he's black, but he's really the first confirmed sociologist in this country. He was the first one to do an empirical study on American communities, in the 1800s. Like,
The souls of black folk.
Right. Like, why aren't we studying Du Bois? But I could say that because I'm older and I know better. But think of a kid being in that environment. And
Right.
I was only black in the class all through my college experience there at USC.
And that's what we have to do, is just be the voice, raise the voice, keep the voice moving.
Mm-hmm.
Because if not us, who and when? Is
Yeah.
what I always tell my son. I said, you got to continue to speak up for your own history, your own legacy, your own anything.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Absolutely.
it's not going to always be given to you. So you got to be a seeker of truth, a seeker of knowledge outside of what the norms is.
Mm-hmm.
So it is amazing that Malcolm X stood for so much. Yet, a lot of our leaders that are no longer here with us, history, no one wants to revere it and teach it to our kids. Everything about us is the essence of this world. But they want to continue to push it down,
Water it down.
water it down. So as we have shows like this, and as we continue to have a voice that can be heard across the world now through the invention of this very tool that wasn't created. Well, actually, I believe the internet was created by a black man, wasn't it? At some point, I heard a story.
We had a whole lot to do with it.
Yes.
Cell phones also.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, cell phones.
So
also.
even that part, to be able to contribute to how we get the information out, we just got to do a better job of helping to share. People don't understand the power of sharing information,
And
especially in social media.
that was really the spirit behind what I wanted to do in terms of, my contribution to this day. That meeting that they had. Okay, let's look at the timeline. That meeting was in February of 1964, right? On December 11, 1964, Sam Cooke was assassinated. I use that word because assassination is different from just murder.
Absolutely.
Assassination conjures up political
Implications,
imagery.
yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. In February of 1965, a few months after Sam Cooke, Malcolm X was assassinated.
February 21st.
February 21st, 1965 in New York.
Audubon Ballroom.
On April, I think it was the 13th, 1967, Ali was stripped of his title. So in a span of 3 years, basically, you took down 3 powerful black men, America. You took them down.
And then 68.
Oh, that's,
3 years later.
I don't even like 1968.
67?
1968 was like the worst year.
Decade.
I'm just talking about that year, 68. Dr. King, Kennedy, assault on the Panthers offices, the students in Chicago at the Democratic National Convention. I can go on and on about 68.
1968. What was,
I mean, they was just like, let's just kill everybody.
in 1968.
Yeah. Well,
J. Edgar
60s
Hoover and his
period.
boys.
Yeah.
COINTELPRO in full effect.
What was that? COINTELPRO.
COINTELPRO was the assault against any black power movement, any black-led civil rights movement. I mean, they deemed these organizations and these men, Malcolm, Martin, Stokely, all of these brothers, as the biggest threat
To America.
Wow.
The biggest threat.
Even though we were less than 10% of the population, like, how could we be the biggest threat?
And even though most of their movements were absolutely nonviolent, they were considered the biggest threat because they were just waking people up and standing up for their own human rights.
So I'm going to agree with you, brother, and I'm going to go back to early 60s, and I'm going to reveal, if people don't know, that there were FBI files on Sam Cooke.
Absolutely.
Why were there FBI files on Sam Cooke?
An entertainer,
An entertainer, right?
because he had connections with
Oh,
Muhammad Ali and Malcolm X.
they
Exactly.
and Dr. King. Dr. King asked Sam. He said, "That song you just wrote, what's it called? A change is gonna come. Can I put that song, my brother, on the next fundraising album so we can raise some funds?" And Sam Cooke said, "Sure, Dr. King, you can have the song." You know what I'm saying? I didn't write this song to make money. I wrote this song because a white man named Bob Dylan, who I admire, wrote a song called "Blowing in the Wind."
Yes.
You know, all the answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. You know? Mm-hmm. And Sam said, why didn't the brother write that song? Where's this little white boy coming from writing about, blowing in the wind? How many times must a man be knocked down before he's called a man?
Being political.
Right. And Sam went and said, I have to write something. More than just, I love you, baby, let's get married. I got to write something that means something to people. And he wrote, A Change Is Gonna Come. He wrote another song called Ease My Troubling Mind that people haven't heard. And I'm going to perform that song on June the 1st at Barbara Morrison's.
That's right. You got a show coming up on June the 1st.
Yeah.
Definitely at Barbara Morrison's right here in Leimert Park.
Doors open at 7 o'clock.
Doors open at 7.
And then we're going to interview Billy Foster, the great R&B legend who was married to Etta James. And then we're going to go into the show portion. And I'm hoping my brother, that's his birthday, by the way.
June
and I'm
Yes.
hoping he spends his birthday because we want to celebrate his birthday that night.
Happy early birthday.
Thank you very much.
And stuff like
Thank
that.
you. Thank you.
But, and of course Malcolm X was followed by the FBI. And, of course, Jim Brown was also. And Ali, of course.
Yes.
So, it seems that was like a badge of honor to be followed by the FBI. James Baldwin.
Well, I think
Paul
when you
Robeson.
have the ears of the masses,
Right.
like Sam Cooke had the ears
Right.
of the masses, millions, not only black folks, but white folks, loved his music. So to have the ears of that many people and
Black
you
and
start, black and white, and you start speaking political, and you start speaking the rights of people and human rights violations against people, then
And
you don't shake your ground.
And
They
guess
can't
what?
have that.
And guess what? You might not know this. The song "A Change Is Gonna Come" has only been performed once live that we know of. And that was on the Johnny Carson show in 1964. And the tape mysteriously disappeared. Now, the other song he did on that show, called Basin Street, it's there. You can go on YouTube right now and punch in Sam Cooke on Johnny Carson, and Basin Street is going to come up. But he also performed "A Change Is Gonna Come" on that show. Now, there was a lyric in that song, my brother, you might know, that said, well, I go to the movie and I go downtown. Somebody keep telling me, don't hang around. They took that lyric out of the song. For 35, 40 years, you would buy "A Change Is Gonna Come," the song, and you wouldn't hear that lyric. They took it out.
Wow.
And it shows you how powerful music is, and people like Curtis Mayfield came along and writing, people get ready
Marvin
to change.
Gaye, what's going
Marvin
on?
Gaye,
Right.
Hathaway. I mean, we can go on and on and on about the music of that time. And then you see a shift in the music in the, say 80s, I would say late 70s, 80s, where it became very non-political, and,
Now, so in that same vein, is that a real...
Coltrane died at 40, 41.
Right.
Like, what happened there?
Yeah.
He was 41 years old. 40 years old.
Is that why... can you guys relate to the fact that that's the reason why we don't have a strong black leadership out of fear?
Of course.
Oh, absolutely.
If you start killing everybody, if you think you want to be a black leader and you start studying black leaders, and everyone you study just died early. Fred Hampton was the leader of the Black Panther Party in Chicago. He was 21 years old.
Yes.
21 years
FBI
old.
broke in the house, killed him right alongside of his woman in the bed.
She was pregnant too.
Yeah, pregnant with her son, Fred Hampton Jr., who was actually a good friend of ours. So yeah, that was a part in the play, the meeting with Malcolm and Martin, and there's a scene that Malcolm speaks on, and he was telling Martin, like, how long do we have to go through this? How long are our children gonna believe that if you lead, you die. If you lead, you die. He said, how long are we going to teach this to our children?
Right.
Because they're instilling that fear in us that if you lead,
you will die.
You die.
But there are those who we can come up to date now, like Tupac, who had no fear.
Right.
Like Brother Nipsey, who just passed.
Yes.
Who had no fear. It's like there are things we have to do. And if I have to do it, then so be it. And if I have to die because I'm doing it, hey, I'm not afraid
the
of that.
marathon should continue.
Absolutely.
It has to continue.
Because of that.
It must.
Yeah. So, I know we're running up on time here. I think we got 4 minutes left.
Right.
You know?
But it's amazing how, when you think about it, hey, partner, I'm on the radio right now. I know you're calling me, but I'll hit you back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How, when you think about all the power and the intellectual capital that exists here today, all the scholars, the what's his name, West, the
Ta-Nehisi Coates,
right,
Cornel West, Michael Eric Dyson.
Right. The mass intellectual capital that we have here today in 2019.
All three of those men, Ta-Nehisi Coates, Michael Eric Dyson, and what did I just say? Cornel West.
Cornel West.
They're all divided. They can't hardly have a conversation with each other. So we see that all through our history, where they kept Malcolm and Martin apart. They kept Du Bois and Booker T and Garvey apart from each other. They kept Martin Delany and Frederick Douglass. I can go on and on and on. John Brown met with Harriet Tubman and tried to convince her to join with him on the Harper's Ferry raid. And she was like, you know something? That ain't going to work. I'm down with you because I'm black. I was a slave and I know what you... But what you're talking about, that ain't going to work. So I can't get with you. Somebody was in between them.
Right.
So it's been going on for a long time,
Divide and conquer.
And we're going to have to figure it out.
Divide and conquer.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so you think we going to have a... So let's switch to Nipsey.
Okay.
His death just recently, within the last month.
Okay, we got 2 minutes.
And how the marathon they're speaking of the marathon continuing. How is that being played out right now in the background?
I feel like this. What I know about him right now that I didn't know months ago is that he was a unifying force in this city. He could go to any neighborhood and he commanded respect, and nobody would mess with him. The way that he got killed does not make any sense. What we have to do is pour the energy into our youth. I spend most of my time in my professional career around young people. I believe that they are the answer to all these issues that we've been going through, but we have to be there for them. It's one thing for us to do something and, be active, but we have to bring them into it. Right. I called Lorenzo and I talked before the program we just did this morning, and I said, look, we got to get some young people on this program. We didn't have enough time to really pull it off, but that's the plan, is to bring them into the services that we're doing, into the organizing that we're doing. They can bring us to a level that we can't get to on our own.
Right.
To me, that would be my answer. Young people are going to have to be embraced and brought up and given the mantle.
Well, the youth is always what led these movements.
Right.
I mean, if you go back to the Civil Rights Movement, Stokely Carmichael, SNCC, they were on the front lines before Martin.
He was 19 years old.
Yes. So, I mean, the Nipsey thing, that was a phenomenon. And the marathon definitely continues. I mean, he woke a lot of people up on both sides, red and blue, Crips and Bloods. And it was definitely an assassination. It was definitely an assassination. There wasn't no beef between the hoods that took Nipsey out. He was doing too much work in the hood.
Right.
I mean, he was really fighting the beast head on. Gentrification, he was fighting it head on. He was buying up the block. They don't want to see black people owning all of their own stuff. Mostly white folks and Asians own all these buildings around here.
Especially not that kind of black person.
Exactly. Especially someone that they feel like was a thug or a gangbanger or whatever and turned his life around, and now he's pouring all this money and resources and economics into his own community. That is powerful. Right. So they definitely took my brother out. But I want to leave y'all with, before we get out of here, YouTube John Legend and Nipsey Hussle's new song. It's called Higher. It's produced by DJ Khaled. It's a phenomenal song. They did the video 3 days before Nipsey was assassinated. They did this video, and DJ Khaled told Nipsey 3 days before he was assassinated, he said, man, we going to win a Grammy for this song. And it's called Higher. It's an amazing song.
Okay.
Go to YouTube and check it out, y'all. We are here. This has been a phenomenal day of show. I'm asking our audience to please share. Share, share, share. Social media is about sharing. Take our video, take our YouTube channel, take our Facebook page on our show and share it out. I'm your host, Linda Morgan, here on Jazzabrations and Beyond with my co-host, Tori Brennan Reese, and our guest, Lorenzo. We bid you a farewell on this Sunday evening. Until the first Sunday in June, take care. Have a great one.
All right.